But my hopes are fairly limited on that count. पार्लियामेंट को भी मैनेज किया जाएगा. ये तंत्र पे लोक की विजय है. लोक, which simply compresses the interviews done by media persons with the Prime Minister. Thankfully, there is not one word from the Prime Minister in that video, so you actually can watch. And where the entire state machinery was working as karyakartas of the BJP. Surat and Indore. These things happen in a back of beyond Bihar Panchayat election, and specific resentment among sections of society who felt Tanashahi was an issue. Believe me, I actually heard this expression. Because I think the easiest thing in the world is to celebrate what happens to succeed and find everything right with it. I think there's something very limited involved here. And to my mind, exit polls are some of the most harmless things in the world. They only affect Satta market and share market, both of which I don't care for. I'm more worried about what happened 2 months before the election, which is what I'll probably focus. So allow me to dodge your question. I'm sure there would be questions out there. And let me just put my comments in 3 parts. One about what happened to supplement some of the questions that Chariji asked. Is there any defeat? Second, about why it happened. Again, to supplement what he said, is there any issue at all? And third, what next? Very quickly, it's a large territory, so allow me to go on very quickly. I would urge Chari Saab to consider the fact that something did happen in the country. And I think something very big happened in the country. And the only name for that is defeat. Why do I think so? On the face of it, a ruling party which has had 2 tenures, which is going for the 3rd tenure, if they manage to get kind of majority, it normally wouldn't be such a bad outing. All over the world, people going for 3rd term face some difficulties. Normally, if you fall a bit below majority and you have your allies who, pre-poll allies in all fairness, who come to support you, you have a legitimate claim to power. The trouble is with the word normally. This was not a normal election by any stretch of imagination. Here is an election where the ruling party outspent the opposition by 1:10 on the formal white money things, if social media spending is anything to go by. But I'm sure if I say 1:100, not many people would disagree with what happened here. In this election, the media, and I do not implicate journalists, I must say that journalists are about as honest as doctors or teachers in this country. So there's no point flogging journalists alone. But in all fairness, it should also be recorded that media, mainstream media of this country was utterly one-sided, played as brazen spokespersons of the ruling party. Yeah. And yesterday, our friend Zubair has put out a 10-minute video which simply compresses the interviews done by media persons with the Prime Minister. Thankfully, there is not one word from the Prime Minister in that video, so you actually can watch. And what is most embarrassing is the kind of questions, the kind of comments that are being made. I mean, I'm not a journalist, but I actually felt ashamed of the whole thing. Let's not forget that this is an election where the entire state machinery was working as karyakartas of the BJP. Surat and Indore. These things happen in a back of beyond Bihar Panchayat election. For parliamentary election, you don't have this thing of not allowing or getting your opponent to withdraw. ये बिहार के पंचायत इलेक्शन में होता था, कभी parliamentary election में नहीं हुई ये चीज. And in order to be absolutely fair, the Election Commission of India was utterly disgraceful in its conduct. So, this is not a fair contest. This is not a normal election. This is truly a David versus Goliath kind of a contest. And in David versus Goliath contest, David has managed to give a punch, a proper bloody nose to Goliath. I don't care for numbers. You cannot understand. I've written an article this morning, so wouldn't bore you. It's in Indian Express. Please read it. I've argued that the outcome of this election cannot be understood merely with numbers. There is a logic of numbers, and there is a logic, this political context to it. Everyone knows that this election was not, to my mind, about Kaun Banega Pradhan Mantri. This election was about the supreme leader wanting a post facto stamp on dismantling of the constitution and in future complete destruction of democratic possibilities in this country. And that has received a setback. Thank God, don't we breathe more easily now. So, no, I didn't mean to be theatrical here. So just to, I can't possibly, I know this is and it's actually brave of Mr. Chari to have come and spoken. I don't know if I would have the courage to come and speak in a situation like this. So I'm just trying to supplement what he has said. No, actually, I truly appreciate, this is not sarcasm, I truly appreciate that you've come here and you're speaking like this. And therefore, I don't want to turn it into a silly debate. Why? The issue of why, was it issueless? No, sir, it was not. Sorry, just to complete one point about the outcome. I think what we have witnessed is a very serious regress of the BJP. It gets clouded by two things. The recession of the BJP, not merely in those three states, in fact, in all the states from Karnataka to Bihar, except Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh, there is a decline in vote share. In some cases, it gets expressed in large number of seats, in some in not seats, but there is a clear systematic swing away across states. It gets clouded by the fact that BJP has a positive swing from Kerala to Odisha. So in overall numbers, it looks like a little thing, but we are looking at something very serious. And I'm glad you reminded me of 1977, because do remember that in 1977, Congress won South India. Congress actually did very positively. We forget the story of it. Yet we all remember what needs to be remembered, namely that it was a punch against emergency, punch against dictatorship, which is what this election was. On why, I would simply say that there is, at least in places where I traveled, I noticed, and I wrote about it, I said, it's return to normal politics. Last two elections were, the entire country was on an abnormal high for different reasons. That abnormal high came back to normalcy. And all the normal things which matter in election, should matter in election, started mattering. In some cases, it worked for the BJP because BJP had answers to those questions. In most cases, it worked against the BJP. What were the kind of questions? To my mind, the things that worked against the BJP, and I'm speaking of this large geography from Karnataka to Bihar. One, there was general disquiet, and general disquiet had to do with livelihood issues, unemployment, above all, Mehangai, and Mehangai has nothing to do with inflation. I think economists confuse these two things. Price rise and inflation are two entirely different things. I'll come back to that at some point. Mehangai was a very major issue, and so was the plight of the farmers. All these issues mattered across this entire geography. There was general unease, and then there was a specific resentment of three or four groups. Farmers, because of the conditions that farmers are in and what has happened to them, and the anger which was stoked by the farmers' agitation. Dalits, I think Chari Saab gave us all a very lovely hint for the constitution question that he himself raised. Pramod Mahajan's answer actually applies to that. That is the real answer. Some accusations tend to stick on some kind of people. With the BJP, when you say anti-constitution, you don't have to give too much evidence. It sticks. And that's actually what happened. These things stick. Anti-reservation, anti-constitution. People believe it. It's all. There's specific resentment among Muslims because they felt they were being reduced to second-rate citizenship. And specific resentment among sections of society who felt Tana Shahi was an issue. Believe me, I actually heard this expression, and whenever we heard it, I checked with my colleagues. तुमने तो अपने मुंह से नहीं बोला था. नहीं सर, वो खुद बोल रहे थे. मैंने खुद सुना. Tana Shahi is a word being used, and so there was, and this came from RSS supporters. They said, vote BJP को देंगे, लेकिन ये गलत हो रहा है, ये नहीं होना चाहिए. चीफ मिनिस्टर को पकड़ के अंदर कर दिया, ये कर दिया. RSS people took me aside and said, देश में थोड़ा बेहतर ऑपोजिशन होना चाहिए, आप लोग कुछ काम कीजिए ना इसके लिए. So that's the strength of this country. So all these things made a difference. And then, of course, there was a local anger against BJP's sitting representatives and so on. I'll just now finally just rattle off what I expect in terms of consequences from this verdict. Many friends expect the Modi government to become democratic because of the compulsions of coalition. I don't share that optimism. I think that's simply against Mr. Modi's DNA. I think, and the trouble is all over the world, authoritarian rulers get into the habit of believing that everything can be managed. That's the problem with the duo here. They believe everything can be managed, everyone can be managed, everything has a price, everyone has a price. I suspect they'll go on with the same. But it may be a small check to begin with. I expect the parliament to be a little more vocal, a little more space for debate and discussions. But my hopes are fairly limited on that count. Parliament को भी manage किया जाएगा. Media, I mean, this is in ascending order of my hopes. Media, I do hope some voices because I seriously meant it, there are as many honest teachers and doctors as there are honest journalists. Honest journalists would have a little more space in their newsrooms, would be able to occasionally quarrel with their editor, occasionally push a few things, which is such a great idea. So a little more opening in the media. And I hope, I'm not a very good judge, and after this event, I'm going to Prashant Bhushan to check it. I do hope that judiciary may be able to read those lines in the law and constitution, which were kind of blurred for the last few years. So the lines may look a little sharp now. I'm hoping that. But above all, my hope resides on the fact that protests, movements, andolans of this country will get stronger. And on that, I have no doubt. I don't have to check that with anyone. And in the last instance, democracy depends on that. For the last few years, many other political scientists, had started calling India competitive authoritarianism. Because I think we should not work with a very simple binary of democracy, dictatorship. A very large number of countries in the world today are hybrid. And competitive authoritarianism is one of those hybrids. What this verdict has done is that it has expanded the scope of, it's up the competitive part a bit and down the authoritarianism for a little while. As I say in Hindi, ये तंत्र पे लोक की विजय है. लोक, ये तंत्र पे लोक की विजय है. Lokatantra, usually tantra is tantra lok usually. But momentarily, Lokatantra looks like Lok Tantra, which is what has happened. It may be momentary, It may not last very long. Enormous effort has to be put in because, mind you, this is not an election game. And that's why I absolutely can't do much discussion on exit polls and such like. This is not a T20 match. This is dismantling of our republic. And this verdict, this outcome, has given us a little hope that we can reclaim the republic if we continue to make efforts. And as a Bharat Jodo Abhiyan national convener, may I take 5 seconds for advertisement that you are all welcome to join Bharat Jodo Abhiyan for reclaiming the republic. Thank you.
खबरों में बने रहने के लिए फोरम 4 को सब्सक्राइब करें और नोटिफिकेशन पाने के लिए बेल आइकन दबाएं।